What's up, everybody? It's Charles, and here we have our next project car, or should I say like our next future unfinished project car. Right here we have a 2004 Blackmagic Pearl R32, and you might be thinking, Charles, why do you have another R32? You already have one, and it's way nicer. You're 100% right. And that one's gonna stay super nice. This one, we're gonna do all that go fast, cool stuff you guys wanted me to do to the blue car. That's what we're gonna be doing to this car. Also, towards the end of the video, I'll update you on some of the other projects, because you're probably thinking, Charles, this is just going to be another project that you don't get anywhere with. What happened to the white car? What happened to the blue car? What happened to the yellow car? What happened to the Touareg? Those cars are all still here, and they're actually at a level of completion that's pretty solid. So time to start on the next deal. So I picked up this car a few months ago in what I think is probably the cheapest running, not wrecked, R32 in the US, which is pretty darn cool. We'll break down the price in a little bit. So it's got about 220,000 miles on it, and she's got her fair share of issues. The great thing about this is this is actually in worse condition than the blue car, so it allows me to fix some other things, some different things, and actually go through the diagnostic process on a handful of issues that I know the car had, and I knew the car had when I got it. So the story of getting this car is actually pretty fun. The previous owner of the car reached out to me. He's like, hey Charles, I got this 04 R32, and it's got some issues, mostly coming from like the front suspension and brake issues. Can you try and help me out? So we had some back and forth, tried to help him out with some of the issues, and finally got to the point where I maximized really what I could do helping someone essentially with telediagnosis. Previous owner hinted at wanting to sell the car. Of course, I'm all in on picking up a slamming deal on an R32. Finally settled on a price. I actually paid $3,300 for the car. Again, the car does run. It's drivable, but it ain't a whole lot safe to be driving. In fact, I've not really done anything but drive it up and down the street, which if you watch the Miata video, you've seen it bouncing up and down because the rear shock absorbers, even still, are off the vehicle. Had the car shipped down here in January, and you guys have seen it under the cover for the last few months while we finished a ton of other projects, including the shop build. So the issues that he was having was front suspension, front wheel bearing issues, and of course, stuff like that's so hard to diagnose when you're not able to actually put your own eyeballs on it. Now, I haven't done a ton on the initial inspection, but I did want to dive in a little bit and just do visuals on the front suspension because that was the primary source of the issues. And on that initial inspection, I know I found at least where we need to start, right? It may not be all the issues. There may be more underlying problems. It's tough when you don't really feel safe driving the car to diagnose suspension issues that you may need to actually be driving the car to diagnose. In just a second, we're gonna get the wheels off and I'm gonna show you guys what I found. So overall, the car is actually in decent shape. It is going to need a fair amount of repairs, and it's funny because it's almost the opposite of things that are wrong with this one that were wrong with the blue one when I first got the blue one. The blue one, the body was in really great shape. The interior had some faded stuff. Mechanically, there was a handful of things wrong with it, but nothing major. This one, on the other hand, we are going to be dealing with a lot of rust. So for those of you that are like, dude, it's so awesome your cars aren't rusted, must be nice. It's awesome that cars aren't rusted. This one's gonna make up for it. I don't know that it's as bad as that white GTI that we had for a while, but this one's pretty bad, and I'll show you some of the key spots that we're gonna have to address. Like the fenders are gonna have to be replaced, of course. They got all rusted out. We'll do a bunch of body panel removals to really dive in and see how bad that rust is before we start putting new parts on the car. Luckily though, the interior is actually in better condition than the blue car was. So what we're gonna get to the point of eventually is trying to extract the best parts from these two cars. The best parts are gonna end up going on the blue car. The blue car was the car that I wanted to really have that almost factory feel, OEM plus feel, things belonging there that really fit that car, especially from 2004, without making any crazy modifications. I don't have that same commitment with this car, which is awesome because that means we can do a big brake kit, we can do coilovers, we can do all the really cool, fun, go fast race car, cool guy things that everybody wanted me to do to the blue car, and I said, no, that's the kind of stuff we're gonna be doing to this one, so it should be fun. With that, let's get a little closer look and see what this black car is all about. And as far as names go, I'm not set on it, but I'm thinking of calling this one the Shadow Trooper or the Rust Trooper. Starting under the hood, things actually don't look too terribly bad. Couple of things I really love. The car is completely stock and it has all the stuff for under the hood. I do have the vehicle battery tray for that. Our engine cover looks like it's in great shape. This actually looks like it's in better shape than the blue car, so that's probably going to the blue car. As commonly happens on Mark IVs, this is not on correctly. We'll handle that at some point in time. Our coolant reservoir shows no coolant in it. We have some of the plastic hosing down the side that's broken. That's ultra common as well. But luckily everything is there. This is gonna be most likely anyway the original core support. A quick check for things like core supports is if it has the stickers on it, it's usually, not always, but usually the original one. A lot of times when core supports are replaced, they don't put new stickers on it. So this is probably anyway the original core support. Of course, our front grills just kind of hold on there. Looks like we might have some rounded out fasteners up behind it, but we'll address that when we need to. This vehicle has had the timing chains put on it at some point. I do have actually a pretty good amount of maintenance records on the car. Either way though, if we end up doing what my plan is, which is going to be a pretty high horsepower car, engine's coming out, engine's gonna get rebuilt anyway, so new chains. That's a video you guys have been asking me about for a long time. We'll go ahead and get that done at that point in time. So from the top side, things actually do look pretty good. And again, the car does run. I haven't really put any miles on it though, because it doesn't feel safe based on the way the brakes behave and the way the suspension behaves. And we'll check those out in just a second. But no significant top end leaks, no damage, nothing crazy. Looks like we might have a little bit of a coolant leak at that junction right here. That always leaks coolant anyway, especially when they're plastic. So we're gonna get that junk out of there and get a metal one put on it. You can see the hood insulation's rubbed through a little bit. We'll replace that. There's a lot of leaves and yuck up here on the cowl trim. We'll make sure we get all that stuff cleaned out, especially if the engine's coming out of the car. That's gonna give us a huge opportunity to get everything straightened out, both on the front end and under the hood. As we take a look at the front end and some of the body damage, we do have a busted bumper. It's broken almost completely off on this bottom corner here. That's something I'm hoping that is repairable. I think it is with like some plastic weld and maybe some filler. I'm not 100% sure though. We may at some point have to just end up putting a new bumper on. That's gonna be challenging because we're almost gonna be guaranteed to have to buy a used one since this bumper is no longer available. Here's our grill that's just kind of on there. That's that sad rounded out fastener right there. Not a big deal, but we'll be able to address that at some point too. The paint looks okay. There's a handful of spots that are gonna need attention. This is where it gets really sad. We have some significant oxidation at the bottom of both front fenders. You can see it all right here. I mean, there's basically a hole right there on the other side especially. What that also says to me is that behind this side skirt, we're gonna have oxidation there as well. That's all gonna need to be addressed. I'm assuming the easiest repair is just gonna be to replace the whole fender, pull these side skirts off, hopefully they don't explode like they like to, and get that fixed and go ahead and put some new fenders on it rather than trying to salvage these. So maybe I'll do something cool with these. Maybe I don't know, maybe we'll do a giveaway. If you guys want to do a giveaway of these fenders when they come off of the car, let me know because that could be super fun. So here's down the side. If I didn't mention it already, this car lived most of its life in the Midwest, in the Michigan, Indiana, Illinois area. So that's why we're seeing all this oxidation. Here's another spot. This is repairable. You can actually, it goes all the way up. Look at that. That's all oxidation and rust underneath this paint. The good thing about some of this stuff is it's fixable. And for things like the fenders, I actually think those fenders are just golf fenders. So we shouldn't have to worry too much about parts availability there. It's the specialty R32 stuff that gets a little sad. If you got the hint a while back, I wish this was in good shape. Here's another spot where we have some pretty good oxidation around this handle. One idea somebody suggested is to actually fill all this in and do the flip-up camera / emblem that some of the newer cars have. That could be cool, like the Mark 7 has it. We have the factory exhaust still, which is awesome. It does also have some kind of purpley yuck tint to it. So that, of course, is gonna go. We're gonna get the right stuff on it. The driver's side looks a little bit better. No oxidation down on here. The interior, I'll move off the lift and we'll go through the interior. The interior is in really good shape. I took this door panel off to do some checking for the blue car. All the parts are there. I also took the radio out. This is a leather trimmed car, not cloth. I like the cloth better, but it's still okay that it's got leather. And what's awesome is the headliner is actually in much better condition than the blue car. So we'll get that swapped over at some point. Looks like maybe they had a roof rack on it with some residue left behind there. When it comes to body rust, this is probably the saddest spot right here. I mean, you can see there's just a straight hole right here in the fender. And of course, that's going to carry down through behind the side skirt. Not thrilled about that. We're going to get that fixed. We're going to get that taken care of. And we're just going to address it and deal with it as we need to. Luckily, this car is going to most likely get an engine rebuild. So that'll give us time to kind of do both at the same time. Now, once we're underneath, we actually see that the car's in pretty decent shape. It has had the oil pan replaced at some point, so that's actually a good thing. We got a little bit of leakage from the filter housing, but nothing crazy. A good sign of some of this oxidation is look at all these hose clamps and just how rusted they are. That's funny. Our secondary air pump mount, you can see it's broken right there. That's a super common Mark IV thing. I'm not going to worry about that one bit at all, because if we do some of those go fast parts, that gets deleted anyway. Looks like we have an aftermarket dog bone mount, ECS tuning dog bone mount. A lot of surface oxidation on the subframe. Once we get over here to the control arms though, look at that. That's pretty rusted up. It does have Bilstein shock absorbers on it, so that's cool. A lot of rust, a lot of oxidation. The control arm bushings look new. We'll pull the wheels off because I want to show you some of the things I found on my inspection that it's hard to see here, but it's a lot easier to see once the wheel's off. Looks like some of these hardware components are new. The nut for that ball joint looks pretty new. The nut for the tie rod end looks new. So we got some stuff that's been replaced. You can see more rust up there. So this subframe will have to come all the way out. We'll go ahead and probably sandblast it and retreat it. Heck, I don't know, we might just throw a new one on just to make sure we have a safe component. What really is going to dictate that is how well that bolt on both sides comes out, because that nut for that bolt is actually welded to the inside of the subframe. Here's where we get some good oxidation though. Look at that catalytic converter. Woo! Those bolts look like if you looked at them wrong, they're going to fall apart. So we can tell that there's been some work back here. See some busted up on the heat shield. What exactly the work was, I don't know. Look at the pinch welds though. Ugh, why must pinch welds be destroyed? Oh, look at that, all down the side, smashed up there. Who cares at this point? That one looks okay though. Looks like we've had some exhaust repair work done right there as well. Prop shaft looks sad. For a lot of the oxidation, I'm not super worried about it. It's stuff like this that gives me a little bit of an uneasy feeling, because a lot of things we're going to either replace or are easy to take apart and resurface and get all the rust off and then paint. It's stuff like that bolt for the rear diff, the drain bolt for the rear diff, that we're going to have to worry about. New springs, it looks like. That's cool. Has the flat bypass, which you know I like that. So all in all, from underneath, not horrible. Not horrible, but not super awesome either. Look at the pinch welds on this side. Yuck, 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 yuck. When I was talking to the previous owner, this seemed to be the corner that the majority of the issues were really revolving around. They were concerned about brake issues, wheel bearing issues, and suspension issues. And with the car all the way on the ground, you could actually see that the upper strut mount looked just all kinds of messed up. Let's get this wheel off. I'm going to show you guys what I found. And this really hits home that a lot of times a simple, thorough visual inspection can tell you a lot about what's wrong with the car. Even if you've not seen 1.5 million suspensions like this or whatever component that we're talking about, simply taking a thorough look and going, wow, that doesn't look quite right, is so valuable, especially if you have the opportunity to compare it to a known good. That makes it even better. And of course we have a wheel lock. wheel lock kit to the rescue. I think I lost my touch for guessing wheel locks. Had it right the first time. Okay, so clearly the first thing we notice is this brake rotor just looks like absolute trash. This is probably the majority of the reason why the brakes perform so poorly. It looks like we have plenty of good friction material, but look at how little contact the pad and rotor are actually making. So the car just stops absolutely terrible. Of course, this is all gonna go. These are slotted rotors, so we could resurface them, but we can't really cut them. Now the pads look like they have plenty of friction material, so I'm gonna guess that a lot of this stuff is pretty new, even in the brake system as well, or it was replaced and then never driven. So here's the kickers of the things that I found. The first like glaring thing, look at that control arm bushing. It's not seated properly. So for that, I don't know if that's like an installation error or if that happened as a result of what I'm gonna show you in just a second, but that clearly is not correct. You could almost see that through the wheel well. It stands out so much. So like I mentioned, they were concerned about wheel bearing issues and noise, and actually on the one drive that I did take to do some brake noise issues, you can hear all kinds of racket coming from this car. So obviously the geometry of the suspension can't be right when we're looking at a bushing that looks like that. A couple of other things I found were, see, there's almost no threads exposed. When we compare that to the other side, there are a couple of threads at least sticking out. So that's a problem that jumped out pretty strong right away. Also, I don't think this is factory hardware. Not that not being factory hardware is gonna make or break a problem, but this could point to, hey, this was replaced in a way that maybe it's a workmanship issue. Obviously, that control arm bushing looking so sad points to probably a workmanship issue as well. As we pan around to this control arm bushing, doesn't look super happy, but it may not be a source of our issue. So as we look at the bottom of this shock absorber, you can see the bottom of the shock absorber there. There's actually a gap between the wheel bearing housing and the shock absorber right there. I don't know, 4 or 5 millimeter gap. That means this shock absorber is not fully seated in the wheel hub or the wheel bearing housing. So that too is going to completely throw off all the suspension geometry. So pretty much everything in this corner of the suspension is unhappy. As we move over to the other side, look at how many threads are hanging out the bottoms of these bolts. The ball joint has the stud pressed through. I'm pretty sure that's factory where the other side wasn't. We can see through the sway bar end link, we do have a couple of threads sticking out, so a little less problematic there. And in fact, on this side too, we're not fully seated. Look at that gap between the shock absorber housing and the wheel bearing housing. It's not fully seated. That's gonna cause a problem. So while I'm not sure that the control arm bushing is the problem or the shock absorber not being fully seated is the problem, I can tell you all those things added up together are not going to make for happy days for this front suspension. So obviously the bushing is going to have to be replaced. I think what we'll probably end up having to do is pull this knuckle completely off the car, clean it out, and then make sure that we can fit the shock absorber all the way down before we even consider changing out any suspension components. The brakes are what they are. I still have the StopTech rotors that I had on my R32. So what we may do is we may clean the pad friction material up, put those rotors on since they actually are like decent, and drive the car and see what we get. Because that rotor right there, holy cow, that is not a happy camper. And the back pads and rotors are pretty much the same way. However, if we end up doing a big brake kit, something like that, none of this will even matter. It's more of a, I don't want to put a big brake kit on, have to pull it back off because our wheel bearing's trashed or the CV joint is trashed or anything like that. Want to make sure that these components are right before we put cool guy race car stuff on it. Here's another look at that rust. Ugh, yuck. Yuck, yuck, yuck. I can tell you what happens is dirt and debris get behind these wheel liners and then it just rots. I mean, look at that. Ugh. I don't want to do it anymore because I don't want to make a mess. Let's go ahead and take a look at the inside. Like I mentioned, I'm the one that took the door panel off. So the door panels are in really good condition. Interior-wise, you know, the driver's seat's got some wear here on the bolster. Some of the stitching's coming apart. This is actually, looks like it's probably been repaired at some point. But either way, it looks pretty decent. It looks about what you'd expect a car with 216,000 miles to have on it. The cool thing though is everything's here. The pedals look like they need to be given some attention. Our auto dimming mirror is not all weird. The headliner looks pretty good for its age, so this one's gonna go in the blue car, of course. Basically anything on this car that's in better condition than the blue car is gonna get it. Even got a box of spare parts, including a brand new alternator and a whole bunch of stuff that's in there. Not sure even all of the stuff that's in there, but a whole bunch of stuff that's in there. It had the factory owner's book, the actual R32 owner's book, which is ultra cool. I got that tucked away inside, safe and sound. We of course need a deep, deep, deep bath, but hey, all things considered, the car looks really good. Even the back seats, good condition of course too. So all in all, the car's in pretty fair, we'll call it fair shape. There's a handful of things that really do need to be addressed and are going to be a little bit challenging, mostly dealing with the body rust and the potential for fasteners to be problematic during that rust repair, or really like fixing the front suspension. The rust is going to be a big issue. The cool thing is this gives us an opportunity to get rid of all that rust, to get a proper paint treatment on it, whether that's paint, powder coat, epoxy, whatever it is. We'll get that proper paint treatment on it, similar to some of the things that we did on the white car. Before we completely tear this car apart and start the rebuild process, there's a handful of things that I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do a full breakdown on the Mark IV and all the things you need to know before you buy one, whether it's an R32 like this, a 2-liter, a diesel, a 99.5, or a 2005. We're gonna address all of those because we're going to be doing some performance modifications, and right now it's looking like we're going to be doing an HPA turbo setup. We need to evaluate the health of the engine, so we'll be doing a compression test, we'll be doing a leak down test, we'll analyze the condition of the engine, both running and not running. So there's going to be a lot of really cool things that we're going to be able to do that are going to be done on this car, but not necessarily only applied to this car, compression and running compression being like the primary ones that I'm thinking of right now. So I'm super jazzed about this project. It's gonna give us an opportunity to do some of the really cool stuff that's out there that we wanted to do on the blue car. We as a community wanted to do on the blue car, but I said, no way, the blue car stays as is, and I'm going to stick to that. We're gonna do all the rad, cool, fun stuff on the black car. So here's what I need from you guys. In the VW Audi community on this generation car, or in general, what are some areas where there's no real good DIY content so that I can do that for you guys while we're doing this really fun rebuild project? I want to make sure that during this time of putting cool stuff on this car, I'm also servicing you guys on some areas that are really lacking out there. I mean, this is an older car, so there's a lot of great stuff out there. I know like DIY R32 chains is one that's really common. How to diagnose chains and chain failure issues before it's catastrophic is another one. So I have those videos planned for you guys as well. That'll sort of tie into the engine health side before we rip the car apart, rebuild it, slap a turbo on it, and put 500 horsepower to the ground. So for the areas that are lacking, let me know so I can make sure we do that before it's way too late. Also make sure you guys are subscribed so you don't miss any of the updates and all that stuff too. Now, I mentioned earlier that I'd tell you about some of the other cars and the status of the other cars. Here's where we're at. The Mark 7.5, the Golf R, the yellow car, it's pretty much where I want it to be. There's going to be future modifications. Suspension is one that I'm highly considering right now. There's going to be new things that come out for that car that I'm going to want to test and tune and try out, like a Haldex controller, Haldex tune, that kind of stuff too. It's in a good spot, but we will still be doing more things to it as time marches forward, but it's not going to really be like the primary focus. We spent roughly the last year having that car as our primary focus. Now, moving on to the 04 R32, aka the blue car. The blue car is actually in a great spot too. You're still gonna see it make a lot of appearances while we're working on the black car, mostly because any of the parts that are better on the black car are gonna go onto the blue car. We're also going to be doing a full sound system in the blue car. That'll be a lot of fun as well. Next up, 99 Miata, the two-tone car. No name for that one. I don't know if I'm even gonna name that one. Boy, you know, once we can autocross again, we're going to be thrashing that in autocross, and hopefully that's very, very soon, because I'm really, really, really antsy to get behind the wheel in a high-performance setting in that car, test out some of the things that we've done to it, and see the areas that the car still lacks. There's also a handful of maintenance bits that still need to get done on that car. As far as future plans for the Miata, kind of depends on what this autocross season looks like. If I decide that like this is going to be the autocross car, we're going to leave it alone because I want to run it street class. If I decide this is not the autocross car and we want something else, I have a fun engine swap that I really want to do to the car. And whether or not I'm capable of doing it, it remains to be seen, but I have a vision of what I want it to look like. Moving on to the white car, the white Wookiee, the 98 GTI VR6 Turbo. We're still in kind of a holding pattern for that. You know, it's going to get to a point where I think I'm probably just going to end up selling it. I'm not there in my heart yet. However, what happens to the Miata may also influence what happens to the white car, because ideally what I'd love to do is take that VR6 Turbo engine out of the white car, out of the GTI, and put it in the Miata. That's like my vision for an engine swap. There's a lot of Miata VW crossover happening right now, and I think a VR6 Turbo Miata would be amazing. It would sound cool, it would have a ton of power, it would handle awesome, and I think it would just be one of the coolest swaps that we could do for the channel. We'll see what that happens. That may be a pipe dream, or it may end up being reality. If that engine comes out of the white car, goes into the Miata, we're probably going to be looking at a 3.2 liter swap back into the white car, maybe something else, I don't know, maybe a TFSI swap. Maybe if I can wrangle up the parts for it, maybe we'll do a 2.5 turbo swap in the white car. Who knows, the world will be our oyster at that point because we'll have a lot of really rad, unique stuff floating around this joint. But in the meantime, this one is the one I'm excited. I'm really thinking like turbo kit, big brake kit, all the cool go fast stuff that we can do to this car, in addition to rehabbing a lot of the stuff, and a lot of demonstration on how to keep and fix and maintain a Mark IV and overcome what I think right now today is the biggest Mark IV problem, and that's poor workmanship. Now, I don't know if that was poor workmanship we saw on the left front corner or not, and a little bit on the right front corner as well. It doesn't really matter at this point now. It's my issue to deal with, so I'm going to show you guys how I'm going to deal with it. And that may be replacing stuff, it may be rehabbing stuff, who knows, we won't know for sure until we get in there. All right, so with that, I'm gonna wrap it up, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know, are you excited about this, or is this just another lame R32? And the big question, did I really find the cheapest R32 in the United States that still runs and is still like a complete vehicle? If you've bought one cheaper, you did, awesome. I'm super excited about the $3,300 that I paid for this car. For comparison, that's about a quarter of what I paid for the blue car, which I still feel like I did all right on. So with that, I'm out. Have an awesome day, and I'll talk to you guys again next time. Bye. Oh, and how about working on the lift again? Ugh, I've missed it so much.